Good Thursday morning. It's Mrs. Crawford, and yesterday on Wednesday, I went ahead and decided not to have you all have any new assignments, and all I asked for you to do was to read chapter 7, which was called The Meeting, and that is actually where Little Willie and Stone Fox met, I guess you'd say kind of for the first time. And I told you all that you had time to use the day to complete any assignments that you still had left to complete. I'm going to show you all something today on your Google Classroom that will make it really easy to find what you have. Everything's already put in one single place under classwork, and you can look at each day and tell what you have to do for that day. So really, guys, there is no reason to not have your work done. If your parents have not told you, the school board did vote for all students who are remote learners to come back on Thursday, September the 17th. So that is a week from today for you guys. So we're going to actually be finishing up our Stone Fox book before you guys come back next Thursday. But when you come back, we're going to be having a test on the book. So if you've not listened to all of the reading that I've done for you all, then you need to make sure that you get caught up. So today, I'm going to be reading chapter 8, and you're going to want to make sure that you listen to this whole video before you join our Google Meet today, okay? So here we go, chapter 8, The Day. The day of the race arrived. Little Willie got up early. He couldn't see out of his right eye. It was swollen shut. Now, very quickly, I'm going to give you just a second. Go ahead and click pause on the video if you want to. Grab a piece of notebook paper that is in your binder, in your notebook. And I want you to go ahead and label today, September 10th, 2020, on the top of your notebook. And we're going to answer some questions today while we're reading. So number 1, your number 1 question is going to be, why is Little Willie's eye swollen shut? So go ahead and click pause on this video and write your answer down. I'll say that again. Number 1, why is Little Willie's eye swollen shut? As he fed Grandfather his oatmeal, he tried to hide his eye with his hand or by turning away, but he was sure Grandfather saw it just the same. After adding more wood to the fire, Little Willie kissed Grandfather, hitched up Searchlight, and started off for town. At the edge of their property, he stopped the sled for a moment and looked back at the farmhouse. The roof was covered with freshly fallen snow. A trail of smoke escaped from the stone chimney. The jagged peaks of the Teton Mountains shot up in the background toward the clear blue sky overhead. Listen to those details, guys. So very, very descriptive. Yes, sir, he remembered Grandfather saying, there are some things in this world worth dying for. Little Willie loved this country. He loved to hike and to fish and to camp out by the lake. But he did not like to hunt. He loved animals too much to be a hunter. He had killed a bird once with a slingshot, but that had been when he was only 6 years old. And that had been enough. In fact, to this day, he still remembered the spot where the poor thing was buried. Lost in his thoughts, Little Willie got to town before he knew it. As he turned onto Main Street, he brought the sled to an abrupt halt. He couldn't believe what he saw. Main Street was jammed with people lined up on both sides of the street. There were people on rooftops and people hanging out of windows. Little Willie hadn't expected such a big turnout. They must have all come to see Stone Fox. Searchlight pulled the sled down Main Street past the crowd. Little Willie saw Miss Williams, his teacher, and Mr. Foster from the bank, and Hank from the post office. And there were Doc Smith and Mayor Smiley and Dusty the drunk. The city slickers were there, and even Clifford Snyder, the tax man, was there. Everybody. Lester came out of the crowd and walked alongside Little Willie for a while. It was one of the few times Little Willie had ever seen Lester without his white apron. "You can do it, Willie. You can beat him," Lester kept saying over and over again. They had a race for the youngsters first, and the crowd cheered and rooted for their favorites. It was a short race, just down to the end of Main Street and back. Little Willie didn't see who won. It didn't matter. And then it was time. The old church clock showed a few minutes before 10 as the contestants positioned themselves directly beneath the long banner that stretched across the street. They stood 9 abreast. Stone Fox in the middle, Little Willie right next to him. Little Willie had read all about the other contestants in the newspaper. They were all well-known mountain men with good racing records and excellent dog teams. But even so, all bets were on Stone Fox. The odds were as high as 100 to 1 that he'd win. Not 1 cent had been bet on Little Willie and Searchlight. "What happened to Willie's eye?" Doc Smith asked Lester. "Bumped it this morning when he got up, he told me." "Just nervous. Got a right to be." Lester was chewing on his hand, his eyes glued on Stone Fox. "Big Indian," he whispered to himself. Although Little Willie's eye was black, puffy, and swollen shut, he still felt like a winner. He was smiling. Searchlight knew the route as well as he did, so it really didn't matter if he could see it all. They were going to win today, and that was final. Both of them knew it. Stone Fox looked bigger than ever standing next to Little Willie. In fact, the top of Little Willie's head was dead even with Stone Fox's waist. "Morning, Mr. Stone Fox," Little Willie said, looking practically straight up. "Sure's a nice day for a race." Stone Fox must have heard Little Willie, but he did not look at him. His face was frozen like ice, and his eyes seemed to lack that sparkle Little Willie remembered seeing before. Now, here's another one. Go ahead and write down number 2. Now, what does it mean when it says his face was frozen like ice? Is his face really ice, Stone Fox? Or what could that possibly mean? Could that mean, like earlier in the book, they said that his face was like granite stone. So if his face is like stone or ice, then what does that mean? What does his face not doing? What does he look like? So this is number 2. Go ahead and hit pause and tell me on number 2, what does it mean when they say that Stone Fox's face was frozen like ice? Okay. The crowd became silent as Mayor Smiley stepped out into the street. Miss Williams clenched her hands together until her knuckles turned white. Lester's mouth hung open, his lips wet. Mr. Foster began chewing his cigar. Hank stared without blinking. Doc Smith held her head up proudly. Dusty took a powerful swig from a whiskey bottle. Clifford Snyder removed a gold watch from his vest pocket and checked the time. Tension filled the air. Little Willie's throat became dry. His hands started to sweat. He could feel his heart thumping. Mayor Smiley raised a pistol to the sky and fired. The race had begun. Okay. Now, I want you to go ahead and write down number 3. And I want you to predict what you think is going to happen in this race. So, make a prediction for number 3 on what you think is going to happen in the race. So, number 1 was, why was little Willie's eye swollen shut? Number 2 was, what does it mean when they say that Stone Fox's face was like frozen like ice? And then number 3 is to make a prediction on what you think is going to happen in this race. Okay? Now, make sure that when you come to class today that you have those 3 things written down, and I will see you during your Google Meet, okay? And I'll be seeing you guys at school next week. All right, bye, guys.